What is going on, JD?
All right, guys. Hey, this is
We're
JD
live.
Bach, your company Xceleration host, and welcome back to another podcast. In today's episode, we're diving into the importance of team health in building high performing teams and driving business growth. This over here is the co host, Matthew Cox, also with company Xceleration, our head coach and expert certified Bloom coach. Why don't you take it away and give us a little more of an introduction about you?
Yeah. Welcome to the show. Again, this is episode 2 with JD and myself. We're excited. So, yeah, like JD said, Company Acceleration is a consulting firm, or we call it business coaching. We give you recommendations, we coach you through tough times. And like you said, I am the head Bloom coach. I've been doing that for a while, doing a lot of scaling. This is the word they use in the industry, JD, is scaling up your business. It's a new trend. You didn't hear it a lot a few years ago. Now it's all over
Oh yeah,
social. Yeah,
it's the buzzword.
it's the buzzword. In other words, it's basically how to move things, and what we do is we come in and really, as the lead coach, I come in and help you put a execution communication system in place so that you can get
Mhm.
things done. That's it. That's how
Just
simple it is.
yeah. So today, things that we're going to kind of go over would be why team health is vital for growth and some practical strategies to foster trust, communication, and alignment with your team. And, we'll give you a little glimpse into some of the tools and frameworks that we use to help businesses succeed. Sound like a plan?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's move right into why do so many businesses overlook team health?
Yeah, so good question. So why do they overlook it? I think team health is something that's kind of not been in the corporate world, in the executive boardrooms. It's not something that most executives want to dabble in. And when you hear team health, what does that mean? You might think, are you physically healthy? Are you whatever? But what team health in the corporate world means is healthy communication, talking about crucial things, addressing things, but really just checking in with one another, in navigating highlighted issues like turnover, and also morale, and just missing goals. How do you know your health of your organization? But also a good example is just lack of conflict. Conflict resolution, JD, is one of the things I see when it comes to team health. A lot of companies I've worked with and sat in the boardrooms, they avoid conflict. It's like walking on eggshells, the elephant in the room, right? And how do we have those crucial conversations, or those tough conversations, for the sake of, there's a saying in the industry, what is the greater good for the business, right? And so the team health conversations are really sometimes hard for some of the C-suite folks, because it's also being a servant leader where you are willing to serve one another, and that's
Mm,
team health too at an executive level. Is if you're on my executive team, I want to make sure you're okay, JD. Hey, JD, how's it going? How's the kids? How's things?
mm.
Really checking in. And sometimes the meetings, one of the things we've done in team health is making meetings every week. So you love your meetings, you love the people you're working with. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can turn meetings back into something you enjoy
Yeah.
once you apply the team health. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to make sure that people understand this isn't all about like hugging each other and
Yeah.
things like
That's
this
not
during
fun.
the meeting. It's simply about being aware of the personalities of people, their strengths and weaknesses, and as well as your own, and accepting that and willing to be slightly vulnerable. You
Yes.
know, so as he was talking about, like, you will start to see this, like some of these signs of poor team health through consistent unresolved conflict. like the tension in the room, the fear of talking about difficult subjects. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on it so people understand is that when it comes to conflict, let's just use conflict for instance. If something is unresolved among the leadership, and we've all been in this, and JD, you've probably seen this when you have a executive team where two of them don't like each other in the room and they just can't
Mm-hmm.
get along, but nobody wants to talk about it. But the other person will personally sabotage the other person's success, or
Right,
they'll point fingers, or and I've seen it in a lot of the companies I've worked with, and it's also if you're the founder and you're listening, this is what causes you to lose revenue. This is what causes you to grow.
right.
Because again, if we're talking about team health, it's probably one of my favorite 8 conversations of the Bloom system, because team health, if you don't have a healthy team, and this doesn't mean perfect team, this means
Mm-hmm.
that individuals are willing to have hard conversations when you come into the room and say, "Hey, was that quarter good? Was it the best quarter we've had? Did we hit our revenue markers? And what are some things we need to work on better?" And then they're willing to say, "Hey, I'd like to, I've missed something. I'd like to talk about it." And they're willing to work together. And that takes a little bit to get a team there sometimes. But Dave Ramsey, I think, says all a really good point when it comes to team health. It's usually the one that has founded the company. They need to get out of their own way, because
Ha,
sometimes
yes,
sometimes the founder or the CEO is the cause of the unhealthy environment.
right.
And they're not letting people. Does that make sense? I don't know if that does.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times what I've seen, JD, over the years is that the CEO will either be too much hands-on, micro micromanagement. That word is not a bad thing. We'll get in that later. But
Mm,
when it becomes unhealthy micromanagement, meaning you don't let them fail, you don't let them learn, and you don't let them own their seat. That's an unhealthy team health.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Uh, touching back on like
Yeah, go ahead.
why this aspect, team health, kind of tends to get, missed in the process. A lot of businesses tend to really focus on the KPIs, those key performance indicators and data, and rightly so. But what we're getting at is this the importance of the team health allows you to really dig into the truth of the data without pointing the finger. It allows you to build healthy relationships so that you're able to focus on the problem, the issue, not the person as the issue.
Yes. Yes, and that's the biggest thing is those indicators is I was just talking to a team just last week. It's funny you say that. And I have 2 of them that sometimes are at each other, and I said that same thing. I says, "Hey, we gotta look at the indicators, and it's not me versus you, it's us attacking the problem." And it's so funny because JD, that's probably the hardest thing for a leadership team sometimes to remember. The team is not the problem is the problem.
Mm,
And when you have
yes,
an executive team of 5 people or 10, you have a lot of brain power there. And sometimes it
right,
becomes, I know more than you. And that's where the unhealthiness comes because if you're not working together as a team, you can't do what you just said. You can't tackle the problem.
right.
And
And
you can't
touching,
go
oops,
ahead.
go ahead. No, no, I was
Well, it
finish
goes
your.
back to what you said on the indicators. If you're not willing to, the indicators mean nothing because
Yeah,
you're focused on the wrong thing, right?
right. That pointing the finger. And
Yeah.
as you touched on the idea of the CEO, there's levels to growth in the business and in the maturity of the CEO. And a lot of times, the owner has a tendency to be stuck in one style of leadership that is not allowing the business to move to that next level of scale. So let's touch on what are some of the key components of a healthy team. We kind of brushed over this, but let's really hone in on this now. Again, things like trust, accountability, open communication, mutual respect. Go ahead and talk about that a bit.
Well, and I like that the key components of a healthy team is just being willing. I'm gonna teach you three things. It's not on here, but it's the willingness to communicate. That'd be
Mhm.
number one. So that would go along with trust and accountability. But open communication is to start with that one. Open communication, it requires willingness, and
Yes.
then having the knowledge to communicate. You got to know how. And here's the thing, JD. Think of this, and well, I want you to think about this and comment on this. Is think about a C-suite of 5, 10 people that are promoted up to a C. And when we say C-suite, everybody knows that means that's the executive team on an organization. They're the ones that are like your ops, your directors, just for those listening. And then if you are one of those, listen to this. So if you promote them, JD, and you've been on some of these C suites, do you see that they're good at communicating, all of them?
No, because
Okay,
what I think you were about to say is a lot of times they're good at their,
what they're doing.
original function, and so they get promoted, and next thing you know, now they're like a leader, which is predominantly communication.
And so in a lot of organizations, so we're talking about what are the key components of a healthy team is what happens a lot of times too in this, and I'll get to the key components is that when they're promoted, hey JD, here, hey, congratulations, awesome job. Here's your manual. Get to work because you were so good at what you're doing over there. I think you can figure it out. And then they walk
Mm,
off. And they think you're already at that level because you did so good because maybe you were in that position for 5 years and you're killing it. And now you got put over here and they gave you a high five and walked away.
mhm.
Or maybe they overtrained you. Have you ever heard of that? Like overtraining? It's called an overstimulation. They'll send you to all this training, they'll give you all these manuals, and that's their onboarding to you as an executive. And they
Ah,
say, good job. And now you're overloaded. And you're like, holy smokes, where do I start? Maybe I didn't want this promotion. Um,
mhm.
Holy wow, the responsibility, because they give you too much at once.
Right.
And so I've seen both the ways of doing it. So going back to what you said, what are the key things of team health? Is really establishing healthy understanding, clarity of roles and expectations. That's number two things in team health.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if I
Okay.
don't have clarity, then my team's going to be unhealthy. Because then we're going to blame and point fingers, and we're going to do this kind of thing. And I point one finger, three are pointing back to me because I'm telling it. Well, it was JD's fault, and then I have the three pointing back because I'm trying to place blame, right?
Right.
But if I have a clear understanding my role and my expectation going into it, now I'm going to be healthy because then it goes to what you just said, accountability, right? I know what I'm supposed to do in my seat. And here's how
Mhm.
the Bloom system works because we just want to give you massive value if you're listening to this. So if I create a seat and I give you four obsessions, like four main points to obsess on, then JD, if you're my CEO, you can say, hey, this issue, where does this go in our accountability chart, which is your flow chart, right?
Right.
He's going to see my seat and see four things and go, oh, that's Matt's. And then he's going to either email me, call me in, or in the board meeting, he's going to say, hey, Matt, I noticed this. What happened here? And I can't make excuses because I own it. I was very clear when I was promoted. Those are the four obsessions or the four things I focus on. Now I can
Right.
delegate. So that's healthy because now you have a set expectation and I have my roles clear. And then I'm communicating openly, but also mutual respect. That's a good one. I'm going to let you talk on that one because mutual respect is bigger than most people think on that level. So what have you seen in that area?
As far as mutual respect, I mean, again,
Yeah.
it goes back to the unresolved conflicts and what you said about both parties, or actually the entire C suite, having a willingness to communicate. That's, I would say, the starting ground.
Yeah, well, the willingness is so hard because if it's been unhealthy in the organization for a while, here's I had a CEO that would do this. Every time somebody spoke, they would get talked down to, or it was very punitive, or it was very what's the word? It was very condescending. And
Mm.
so nobody on the team wanted to talk. There was no mutual respect. And so when the CEO left the room, guess what happened?
Yeah,
Everybody
talking
started
behind it.
talking. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was the
Um,
coach, and I'm like,
I think this. Nope. I'm sorry. Finish that, and then
"No, no, I
that's
was
a
the
good
coach."
segue.
So it's a very hard thing because when it comes to mutual respect, if I don't respect you and you don't respect me, I'm not gonna respect you when you leave the room. And so
Mm.
when you're a leader, you gotta think, so you go, they go. And also another thing is if you're in running and you're not having a healthy team, so if I and I used to be and I'll out myself. I used to be the worst at this. I would say, "Hey, I was up here," and I'd go down. So I had an operations, but I'd go around my operations and go down underneath and tell like 3 people to do one thing.
Oh,
And the reason was is I didn't trust this person. So I thought if I told 3 people, it'd get done. And I finally my coach at the time, this is years ago, before I went into Bloom, my coach, because the reason I jumped into Bloom is because I loved the system. And the coach said, "Look, if you hire this person and you don't respect them and you don't believe they can do it, then fire them because you're not
right.
willing to go through them and you go around them. What's the point of wasting the money there?" And
Yeah.
it hit hard. So I said, "Oh, you're right. Okay, well, let's go through them then." And they hated it, JD, because I now started, and I was kind, I was respectful, but I was holding them accountable. Does that make sense?
Mm. Absolutely. It's demeaning to go around a person. That's a quick way to reduce morale overall.
Very fast.
Um, but it's, it was good segue previously into some of the tools that are used in the system
Yep.
to promote the team health. Things like the Johari window
Yep.
and being able to kind of like discuss openly what are some of the things that you know about yourself that others don't know. What are some of the things that you know about yourself um, that are not known to yourself, but other people know?
Mhm.
And what are the gaps in between? This brings a little bit of a vulnerability and a human aspect.
Yeah.
Um, so this starts to develop this mutual respect of like, okay, these are no longer robots that, hey, I pay you, get it done, right? If you want that A level team, you want their heart in it, then you have to connect more on a human level. So some of
Correct.
these tools, like the Johari window, and then other things that we go over is like the Lencioni's pyramid and the five
Mhm.
dysfunctions of a team. Matt, you want to go into that a little?
Yeah, let's go back to the Johari window. It's the biggest thing to know your blind spots as a leader.
Mm,
So one of the things, if I know myself and I know that others know about me, then they know it, right? So JD, for instance, we own this company together. We have partners. I don't like emails, and I know that, and you know that. So it's not an expectation. Now, blind spots, we both have certain blind spots. We don't know ourselves, but then we say, "Hey, this is where the team health says, hey, we have also a tool on this when we go through is that one thing, the one thing you're going to focus on." So after I
mm,
run teams through this, I say, "Hey, what is a stop behavior and a start behavior you can do for this quarter?" And so it's a blind spot. Once the feedback is given through the Johari window, then the teammate comes up with what the feedback on the blind spot, the things they didn't know that their team gets to share. And it's a really cool process because then they would say, JD, what in all the feedback you got, what's the one thing you're going to work on and do better? So maybe I would say, I'm going to be more responsive. Maybe that was the whole team gave that back to me. Hey,
mm,
we send you emails. We don't care if it's a long one. And then you guys would find out, Well, growing up, I'm not a good speller and writer, so I hate emails. And then all the team says, "It's okay, just tell us you received it or you got it," or all we want to know is a response and that you're okay and or move it over. And so then that would be my one thing for the quarter because
Hmm.
I was willing to be open and let everybody in the room give me feedback. Very powerful tool. And then if we jump down to the pyramid, when I get to do this with the team, JD, and this is fun, um, Lindsay, Patrick Lencioni talks about a team health. Now, it's in the 5 dysfunctions of a team, but he talks about this in a sense of first is lack of trust, right? So this is one of the dysfunctions. If you don't trust your team, I'm sorry, it's going to be hard to scale a team, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't have, if we're a fear of conflict, well, if you've been married or if you've been in a relationship, you're going to have conflict. Even in business, there's conflict. But what Vince Lencioni says in here is that conflict is not always unhealthy. It's important to have conflict because it brings up, you got to
Hmm.
get it out. Like if you're having a frustration and you have a little bit of a heated conversation, it doesn't mean the world's over. It just means,
Hmm.
hey, we're not connecting. I'm not understanding you, and you're not understanding me. And then kind of goes up. But how we do this is when I bring a team in there, I start with conflict or I start with trust because it's the base. And I say, okay, on a scale 1 to 5, 5 being like you're hitting it out of the park and 1 being that you're failing, where do you score your executive team in the room that you are? And it's really cool if they're open and honest, and you have to really set this up. And then they all say, well, we're a 2 or we're a 1. And then they go through and then I average it and I say, okay. And the average, if there's 5 of them in the room and they all scored a 2, we're a little bit in trouble, right? We got to talk about trust. And it's very common if that's low, everything else on that scale is going to be low. So they're
Yeah.
going to be they're
Again,
con
being the foundation, right, of the pyramid.
because what's happening is they're not addressing the conflict. So therefore trust is not there. And then the lack of communication. Well, if I not trust you, I'm not communicating. So I'm assuming, I'm forecasting, I'm guessing, and we know what assumption does. It makes out of me and you, and so we have to see. And these are great tools. And again, we're giving you this. This is what we get to come into your company and do with your executive team. It's so powerful. So that's the pyramid. But once we go through that, then we challenge everybody, and this is part of team health. We challenge you to start working on the lack of trust, and we really figure what that is, and we start flushing that out. And so that's where the culture kind of takes a turn.
Yeah. Um, moving on, we got like leadership's role.
Yeah.
So discuss how leaders set the tone for team health through their communication and behavior. And,
Oh,
and
well,
this
yeah. Go ahead.
falls in line with, aligning the team culture, right? That's
Yeah.
that person's role.
Yeah, I think the leadership roles, starting from the founder, is everything. The visionary needs to set the roles. Like the one of the 8 conversations in Bloom is you have to have a vision. And so that's part of the leadership role. If you don't set the vision and you don't help everybody to see it, why do we want to work for you?
Mm,
Because it's all about you going to a group and saying, here's the vision. Will you be willing to build it with me? And so you hire me and you pay me, but so you go, I go. So if you're not willing to lift at the beginning, then nobody around you is willing to lift. And so it's kind of this: if I come and I get a business loan for $1 million and I'm going to own 100% of the business, but I'm going to pay Johnny 60,000 to come work with me, I have to get him to believe in what we're doing. And that's selling the vision. So that's number one, is that's where health comes, but also the ability to communicate that. Now, if I come in and I take the loan and I hire Johnny and I'm just a jerk and I'm like, hey, dude, I own this company. I'm paying your salary. You're going to listen to me. You better do what I'm doing. How is that communication and behavior? And
Mm.
then Johnny just he takes that for 5 years, and then I put him into leadership. What do you think Johnny's gonna do to the next person?
Hmm.
He's gonna do
Yep.
the same thing because that's what the culture, which goes to what you're saying, aligning with the culture. So if the culture is punitive, then it's gonna be punitive. But if you and this is one of the parts of Bloom and what we do, JD, as a company coming in, um, on one of our days we meet with you, we go through the core values. And 80 to 90% of the time, JD, and you've seen this too, as you've been working with companies, is that a lot of times what happens is I'll say, "Hey, where's your core values?" And they'll say, "Well, I think it's on the wall," or I know in orientation they went over them. I think I remember them. And then they'll try to remember them, and half of them don't know. And and then I'll look at the founder because he's in the room, and I says, "Well, what happened there? Your values became in the background." And if you're a company-driven corporation, if you have a culture and you hire, fire, promote, and lead and do everything by your values, that's your culture. That's
Yes.
aligning with your culture. Because if I get and this happens a lot, like, companies start out with that, and then when the money comes and the profits go, they end up going a different they forget about why they started it.
Yeah.
But if you
Focus
wanna yeah,
goes.
it goes over here, and I've been in a lot of those big organizations where, the CEO is so disconnected, like in some of the hospitals I worked, they were so disconnected, they didn't even know who the janitor but now I remember working in a big organization where the CEO, he didn't have such big pants, he would talk to everybody, even the janitor, everybody, and that culture rocked. That
Mm.
was a fun company to work for because it was because he set the tone, like, from the
Sure.
top down, yeah. So I think that answers, but this is my favorite part. Culture is the king of scaling. If you can get the culture, sell the vision, you'll go from 1 million to 18 million overnight. Like it's
Right.
maybe not overnight, but maybe like in a year or something, but
Yeah.
fast.
One of the key factors is having that vision that's crystal clear, large enough to attract people, those A players that feel aligned with that. And then the skills to communicate that vision and sell them on it. You're going to get that top level talent that comes in.
Yeah.
And, the difference between a bunch of B level players and an A level players, I know this is probably an overused word, but growth it's exponential.
Yes. And expand on that a little bit more. Growth is exponential. So people like go a little deeper into that.
Well, I mean, if you could just imagine like the typical hockey stick
Mhm.
graph, right? It's like you're growing just a little bit every year, but then all of a sudden you start aligning your vision and learning to communicate that vision and then going back another level, like those core values that are permeating all aspects of the business. Your discussions are not like, hey, you broke this rule and we're going to write you up for this. It's a discussion about how it doesn't align with the company culture and the values of the business, and then you start attracting that high level talent, and
Yeah.
that's when you're gonna hockey stick.
And that's a good I love that analogy because it's about growing and attracting is what I'm hearing you say, and that's where a lot of people, don't grow that piece of it, and so
Well,
they really struggle. Go
it,
ahead.
it comes back to the vision and being able to communicate that vision, right? So
It
having the open communication and
it
being that type of leader
yeah,
that can put the ego aside and like, hey, we're in this together. Like, let's go here.
and it's interesting you say that because one of the things that if you are thinking about an operating system, one of the things we really drive home is every time you do a pulsing, you have to reintroduce a vision to the whole company. So once get you to a quarterly pulsing and you're doing your quarterly, right after that quarterly, you you reintroduce the vision every time. Isn't that crazy? So then what we're teaching is reintroducing I can't say it today. Re Go ahead and say it for me.
Reintroducing.
Oh, okay. We in 1 year we do it in 4 quarters, right? So there's 4 quarters in a year. So every time you quarterly pulse, you're gonna re-share that vision. Isn't that crazy? And in all the companies over the years I've worked with a lot of leaders, none of it's very rare when they do that unless they're on some sort of program. But in most cases, most of them don't reintroduce it because then they're
Right.
like, "Hey, JD, it's been 9 years. What was our vision again? Oh yeah, make money. Okay, cool." Um,
Right.
but there's only 2 ways in business. It's either you scale it to sell it or you grow it to pass it on,
Mhm.
pass on the vision because eventually you're gonna retire. So if you're gonna pass that vision on, I had one, this is kinda cool. She scaled it to sell it, and she at the end of her when she sold, she ended up with she had a small team. I think it was about 5 or so. She ended up giving them a very large lump sum, saying, "Hey, thank you so much for doing what you've done."
Mm.
So that's one way you got to look at why are you doing it. If you sell it to scale it or sell it to grow it, then what it looks like is maybe you're going to break off and do maybe the people that started with you are going to break off and start other things and then give them an opportunity.
Mm.
And maybe that's what you have to do. So as the visionary, you have to decide which way you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's dig into some practical steps for sustaining like a healthy team dynamic.
I love it.
Um, one of the other tools that we use would be the start, stop, continue. And we walk people through an activity. Like start is what should we begin to do to improve? Stop what's not working and needs to end, and continue what's working well that we should keep doing. Why don't you?
Okay, so what's doing well? Let's start with the first one. What should we do to begin doing the improving? I would say hire me and JD.
Ha.
I had to say that. Yeah, so I think, but I mean, kidding aside, you need an operating system. That's it. I don't care if it's us or anything. You just need an operating system to start improving that team health. But it's also, I think what's not working and what you need to end is um, stop thinking you have the answers as an owner, as a visionary, because team health takes a team to do it. That's why it's called team health. Like it can't just be you. But it starts with, I think, to start. Let's start here. I think the biggest thing is it's going to start with the visionary. Does that make sense? So the visionary is the start. So if I was to answer that, where to start would be you as the visionary need to decide, is my team
Right.
healthy? Do I need this? And I can answer 99% of the time your team needs team health. I don't care
Right.
what kind of
Yeah.
company you are. And then
Well, as
start.
far as the activity, that we use to create intentional team health, right? So being able to go through some of the issues that and attack them from this, start, stop, continue kind of aspect of like we also walk you through the 5 whys, right?
Mhm.
Of peeling the onion to get to the deeper layers of the issues. Um, and again, it goes back to the idea of attack the problem, not the person.
Yes.
And when you're able to, you have the proper tools because learning communication is a skill, you
Very much.
know, you absolutely can learn it. So if you have the right tools, which we help provide to you, such as we're, touching on here, the start, stop, continue, it allows you to kind of go through and flesh out the real root of the problem, the 5 whys, and then kind of figure out like where you're going next. You know, what
Yeah.
should we begin doing to improve this, right? Stop. what's not working and needs to end, continue, what's working well, and what we should keep doing. All right.
Yeah, and that goes back to a lot of the tips throughout the onboarding into a system like Bloom or when we're quarterly pulsing. So when we get you onboarded after 90 days and we start pulsing with you every quarter, these are things we do every time we meet as a leadership. So to go like what you're saying, JD, on the start, stop, and continue, they're constantly in these meetings.
Hmm.
It is designed within, it's baked within the system. So like if I'm
Hmm.
running my Bloom meeting every week, 90 minutes, we're gonna look at this because it's called ID, like, hey, what's the issue? Oh no, so how are we addressing that? And we're gonna look at it. So team health is, I mean, for me, and I'll just explain it my way, is this stop, start, and continue, but it's also looking at the ability to look at each individual on the team and what they can stop and start doing, right? And are they holding themselves accountable? Because that's health. That is team health. If you're not owning your seat and you're not doing what you're supposed to for your team, that's when the team starts getting unhealthy.
Right.
Because it's kind of like a football analogy. If I'm the lineman and I let that person through the line, then I let my team down. That's our whole goal when we're playing sports is we're trying to protect the quarterback so he can throw that pass and we get a goal. And business is just like that. An analogy, if I in my team health, if I do my job and I protect the quarterback and I get that ball down the field, we're going to win as a team.
Hmm.
We're in business to win, and it
Right.
takes team health. So going back to what you're saying, some of the things that we can do, the start stop is a good one, but I can only encourage as much. I think in all the teams I've worked with, it really just comes down to the first thing you can do is start looking at yourself. Like, what position do I own? Am I doing it? And then when you come into a group like what me and JD run, oh my gosh, game day is going to change because then you show up and you're present and you're willing to do it. I'm going to tell you, I think the biggest thing they can do in team health, JD, is hire a coach because it goes down back to the Jahari window, right? You
Right.
don't see what you don't see, or you don't know what you don't know, and your blind spots. That's where a coach comes in, and it's just
Absolutely. And it's sometimes, for lack of better term, it takes a lot to swallow your ego sometimes and allow somebody that has the expertise to come in, take that 10,000 foot, 30,000 foot view of everything and start to systematically work you through some of the bottlenecks. And that's what we do. Um, Before we get off on a tangent, some of these key things is based on like this start, stop, continue, the five whys, like, the Johari window and the, Lencioni's pyramid, these kinds of things. These are tools. But by using these tools, if you have clear roles and expectations and know who reports to who, and as he says, like the four obsessions, keep it simple, right?
yeah,
It's not like, oh, every person on the team needs to go to this person's, uh, you know, report of like what they're responsible for, their roles and responsibilities, and be like, oh, right here, paragraph 5, line 2 says like that's you. If you keep it simple, these are your obsessions. It seems pretty obvious, whose field that the ball is on. Um,
yep,
and by using these tools, then again, it goes back to you're no longer saying, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. You need to do that. It's we're moving to the goal, right? And this is how we plan to do it. This is what we should start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. And then we don't need to say who's going to do it per se. It becomes obvious. And now you're attacking the problem, not the person.
yeah. And I think, looking at it, it just reminds me, and I like to share stories because this is what brings it to reality. So my experience coaching, I remember a group on this topic, we were coaching them. And as we got in there, they were wondering why they were losing so much revenue. And as we peel back the onion, that's a good phrase, right? In the team health, you're peeling back the onion and you're trying to, as a coach, analyze what's going on. Cause I have a higher, I'm 30,000 feet above air looking on the business, kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Right. And most of them are working in the business. So it's hard because their team health is not working, right? Because they're not communicating, they're not resolving conflict, they're not clarifying roles, and they're not celebrating wins. And
Mm,
so in this scenario, the COO was not doing their job. Like he was deferring, he was having lots of meetings everywhere, but he was going around people. Remember what we talked about? He was going around people and he was causing so much conflict in the organization. So by just patching that up and making those moves, and what was different is that the visionary and the founder was willing to make those changes quick. And
mm,
that'll save his company, because
yeah.
if he doesn't, guess what happens, JD? It's the team health gets worse
Yeah.
and worse and worse. And fungus is the worst rot you can do. And so the fungus among you as business owners, and what JD's talking here is resolving conflict, clarifying roles. If you don't stop putting the blinders on and, well, no, they'll get better. No, they mean well. No,
Mhm.
I think we should wait. Let's wait for that to, and I'm telling you responses. These are real responses from executives and owners of businesses, because they're attached to that individual. But then finally, as a coach, and this is where a coach comes in, JD, for team health. Hey, Mr. Joe, if that's the person that owns a business, if you don't do this move, you won't have a business, but probably more than 4 more months, and then you'll be done. And then I says, but again, I'm a coach, I'm recommending it. And you have to really help them in the team health section because they've been so sucked into the unhealthy team. Does that make sense?
Mm,
And so we're talking about team health. This
yeah.
is what Bloom and this is what company acceleration does for you, is we get to come in and figure out where that is, and we navigate what JD's talking about and all these wonderful tools, then which ends up in a success story, which is what I'm sharing now. Is that was the turning point. Another company did the same thing. There was another coach. He was sharing that he went in and coached this individual, $3 million in negative debt. He didn't know why, because they were working so much. It was a construction company. He's like, we have tons of jobs, tons of jobs. And the health was that we avoid certain things and we don't talk about things. So then the Bloom coach, he said, hey, I'll take over as fraction CFO, because he used to be in construction.
Mm.
Okay, so that was last year, JD. They were 3 million in the negative. What do you think now in October? He just told me the other night, because he
20
implemented
million.
17 million profit.
There you go.
In
Like
a
it telling you it's that hockey stick thing.
All they had to do is go in and start having crucial conversations in team health and do the Johari, and then he figured out when he was starting to flush out these things, they just weren't billing people because they were good at doing the construction, but they didn't like the billing part, the blind spot.
Yeah.
And so that was a $17 million turn in 1 year.
Wow.
So if you're listening,
Phenomenal.
this is what team health does. This is what we do as coaches.
Right.
So I think that answers the question there, but
Yeah.
I like
And
this
don't
next.
forget to celebrate the wins,
Oh, yes.
people.
And
Yeah.
he told the owner that. He said, "Hey," he goes, "You wanna know where you're at? Because some owners don't have a clue. They're just hard workers. They just put their heads down, and they need somebody like us, me and you." And he goes, "Well, um, I think my goal was 13," and he says, "Oh, you're past that." And he's like, "Holy smokes." Now He goes, "Man, I was having a money
Ooh.
problem. Now I got to figure out my taxes." And I laughed and I go, "It's better to have a tax problem than a money problem." Like, yeah, and I'm like,
Ain't that the truth?
yeah, and so that's the win, and I love that you said that, GD, because a lot of times when we're in the grind as business owners, I used to have a hard time celebrating the wins because it's like, "Oh, what I gotta." I think Mark Cuban said the best is like, "Hey, I got here, I just don't wanna screw it up." You know, I'm up here and I'm trying to hold it all together. I don't wanna, like, fall, you know? And my personal experience, one of the things I learned as a business owner, and this is what we've really focused on company acceleration from experience, is how to sell it too. I think when I sold my business for the first time, I sold it to the wrong group. And that's something we help you as an owner too. If you're going to scale it to sell it towards that exit, we're going to teach you how to set that up, and
Right.
from wise decision making, doing some tax strategies, and making
Yes.
sure you get ready for that because you can go the wrong way. The wrong person you sell it to. If you remember the story, and stories are good because the one lady that gave money to her employees, her business lasted only 2 years after she sold it because they ran it into the ground. Um,
Mm.
I experienced that same thing. Sold it to the wrong people. They ran it into the ground. I don't know if in the restaurant business you've been in there. That's pretty common in the restaurant business, right? You
Mm.
sell a huge restaurant chain, and how long does it usually last if they
Oh,
don't
yeah. Well, my partners,
ran
sadly,
ran it
after
in?
I exited, COVID hit and
It was done. You exited right
yeah,
time, yep, and so these are big things on team health too, and I like this next one. It says measuring team health and tools. I like this one. I'm gonna ask you the question, so I'm gonna flip it. How can businesses measure team health?
measure, yeah.
Yeah, how can I
The
measure?
measurement is it's all well and good to go, "Hey, we've got, better team health," but how do you really know?
Yeah.
Um, so what are you doing on the back end to judge this? And this is definitely something that is a part of every single meeting, within the pulse,
Yes.
is to rate how you feel, the effectiveness of that meeting.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to go to a meeting where you feel like you just wasted 90 minutes of your day of getting stuff done. So by constantly getting that feedback, okay, well, we got a low score here. Let's reflect on that and see, where we lost time or where we, one of the big things, the tangents, right? So we got the tangent button that everybody has access to. If you're getting off topic, you can kind of anonymously sort of like tap the tangent button. That's a pretty cool tool. So, just doing surveys, having like those 360-degree surveys, like you're not just evaluating the people below you, the people below you evaluating the people above, so that you can keep that the team health. And the other things are attrition, like how frequently are you losing key people in the business or just people in general? Are they staying with you 1 to 2 months and then jumping ship? By tracking these metrics, you can really start to get this to see like the health overall of the company, and you absolutely need to be tracking those churn,
Yeah, turn.
employee churn.
And how that looks. I like what you're saying there too. I had that experience again. I just did a team quarterly yesterday, Saturday. And it was half a day. We came into, we did a house. It was interesting. One of them said in the tools, she goes, "We just need a better agenda." And I had I stopped for a minute and I go, help me understand, because I just says, give me some more information on that. But what it was, as we flushed it out, they'd been using Bloom for about 2 months already, and so the Bloom software that runs the meetings and everything, But what she was used to is the old school of doing agendas. Remember those days where
Mhm.
you'd have a huge PDF file and the secretary would put it all together and it was like action items and and I was in one just the other week for a new client. I usually say, hey, let me join your meetings as I get into their organization. And it was their corporate meeting. And it became this reporting out kind of thing. And that's what she was used to, is that reporting out kind of concept. And I said, well, let's just table that for a minute because in today's session, we're going to get down and really go over it. So when we got to that section here, and I'm looking at what you say here, Bloom system and tracking team dynamics, right? And so
Mm.
Bloom system is what tracks everything. It works on the business. And you say this all the time. The Bloom system is working on the business. All your other systems are working in the business.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I had to explain that, and she had an aha moment. She goes, "Oh, okay." So then that goes down to how do we measure team health? Is that we're pulsing and we're communicating and we're having the same conversations across the whole company.
Right.
Does that make
You're gonna
sense?
see all of the metrics starting to improve
Yeah. So
if you have good team health,
So
plain
that
and
just adds
simple.
to what you were saying. It just she didn't get it because she was having one conversation over here, then it was like this light bulb. She goes, "Oh, that's how we keep everybody on the same page." And that's
Right.
team health, yeah.
And, you bring up another good point.
Yep.
An agenda is somewhat irrelevant once you start using this
Oh,
because
yeah.
every single meeting has a specific structure that allows you to touch on the most important aspects of the business every meeting
Yeah.
so that you're continually growing and getting high value tasks done and then measuring those results.
Well, I think too, I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but the
No.
biggest thing I think was the takeaway was I had to really help this team to understand that if everything's important, nothing's important. And
Mm,
that's the Bloom system. It really gets you to because a lot of times when you first start working with a team, when you're saying, okay, hey, bring your issues, bring your obstacles, they show up with nothing. And I'm like, how was that week? So we're doing business, but you have no obstacles, no issues, no team health issues. Man, you guys
mhm.
are rocking. I keep paying me because I guess I'm not here for a reason. Like, so I had to get through it to help them understand that if everything's important, nothing is. But if nothing's important, then we're in trouble. So if you can't bring something to the team, like the executive team to help you solve it, then we're in trouble. So a lot of teams, what they do too in team health, JD, is they'll do what's called introvert. They won't share. Hey, I can't share this because I'm a fear. I want to hold my job. I'm worried that
Job
I'm going to be
security.
looked at. What's that?
Job security, yeah.
Yeah, or they just don't know how. It goes back to what we talked about earlier. Willingness, do you have the knowledge of communicating and can you get it across with skills? So when you come to like if me and you are in a meeting, I say, "Hey JD, I'm having this issue because I can't get it to the finish line. Can we discuss it?" Sure, and then we brainstorm it. And as we go through discussion, you say, "Hey, some good solutions." You share a few solutions, and I'm like, "Oh, that one's good. I'm solved. Thanks, man."
Mm,
And then you say, "Hey, well, let's capture a to do so we can track this." Oh, there's the measurable, right?
mm,
And so we put it in our system, and now it's trackable because we solved it, and that's just helping me. And so I know it's on my to dos. And then next time we come back, you'll say, "Hey, I noticed you got it done. How'd it go?" And you're like, "Yeah, I knocked it out of the park because that solution was really good, man."
yeah.
Or I'll say, "Yeah, it was good, but now here's something else that came up." And then again, we solve it, right? We work together.
Right. Yeah.
So that's team health, like turning things. But well, this has been a good conversation. I'm loving it
Yeah.
because team
Yeah.
is one of my favorite. We're
Well, you
coming.
can see why team health like kind of is one of those foundations for
Yes.
growth, right?
Yeah.
To build that trust, the communication, and get everybody aligned and on the same page.
Yeah. If
Um,
if I was a if I was a construction worker, it would be the foundation of the whole company
yeah.
'cause I
Um, well, I want to encourage everybody, like, if you want to just know more about company acceleration, you can go to our main webpage. Matthew, I think, can
yeah, I'm gonna share that up.
flash it up here on the screen. Um, yeah, this is our main webpage. If you just want to know more about us and the team and what we do and some of the projects that we work on, because we're also pretty involved in nonprofits and some kind of charity work and things as well. Um, and if you're interested in checking the Bloom system out, then go ahead and go to our landing page over here, and it'll take you directly to it.
Yep.
Um, so if you're looking to grow a healthier team, check us out. And other than that, I'm JD. This is Matt, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, take care till next time. All right.